Hi, everybody. Well, this is an interesting show we've got going for you today because we made strategic decisions along the way about COVID, did a ton of research on it, and voila, as soon as Colorado opened up, I happened to be there doing some shoots for Gaia, and it had opened up the night before I got there. And so all the masks came off, everything came off, and boom, I came home with COVID, the Delta variant. So we're going to talk about the Delta variant blues and our own experience with COVID because it was an incredible journey, one I wouldn't replace, of learning, of beginning to understand which systems are working and which ones aren't, what it does to the body, and so on. So I'm bringing Zeus on because, of course, the gift that keeps on giving. As soon as I got home, I gave it to Zeus. Sorry.
That most likely transfer, they say, between spouses and family members. And
yeah,
we definitely became one of those statistics for sure.
Absolutely inevitable. And we became statistics in other databases, county databases, Kaiser databases, and we became another statistic. And, I thought this was a really wonderful opportunity because even this morning I was looking in the Week magazine and I saw 5 different cartoons on the Delta variant, every one of them highly politicized and propagandized. And I was not happy to see that. And I thought, we need to talk about this from an experiencer's point of view and from a recovery point of view because we're doing great. And I was a triple risk going into it. So
it's interesting because I just read to you the FDA fact sheet on the Pfizer vaccine, not only saying it's not approved, but
right.
also saying it's your choice and your choice alone. And then it goes on to basically not really give you any of the alternatives, but we have to go ahead and do that because we're not going to expect it from mainstream media.
No, we're not going to. And so you and I had both, you've done probably more research than anyone I know, professionally or otherwise, on COVID since it started, looking down every rabbit hole to find out what's going on. And I can say honestly, you've been doing it without a hard point of view. When you started, we just wanted to know what was going on. But as the information emerged along the way, both of us decided early on, even me as a triple risk factor, decided early on that we were going to trust the expertise of the people that we knew, the alternative interventions, and our own immune systems. That was our decision so that we could develop natural immunity. So I would like you to just pick up that thread of the story there on how, what factored into that decision for you.
Right. Well, for me, again, I would add science to all of that. The thing that's so interesting about this is that usually you square off between people using a very narrow understanding of science, scientific materialism, as your audience well knows, and anything that's energetic or homeopathic or spiritual in any way is scoffed at. And yet we have such a deterioration of actual inquiry and truth mattering that now we have the shoe on the other foot. Science is also supporting things like the I word, right? IVERMECTIN. Right?
We have to spell it out.
They might pick it up. But yes. And so overwhelmingly showing that the motives and the emotional structure and the profit of those industries that have used science and even narrowly manipulated science on their side are now being confronted with straightforward, overwhelming scientific proof that what they're doing is not right. And they said, oh, who cares? They're going to take their ball and go home. Who cares? We're going to go plowing through anyway. We will use any mechanism we can, including those political cartoons that you talked about. And we are going to make sure we have no liability. And they're going to get $3 billion to come up with a therapeutic, one we already have, as we've just discussed. So now I am really, I personally, that was part of my journey. That was my big insight or awakening on this. And it wasn't just about trying alternative therapies. It was literally using true scientific rationality along with the understanding how energy works and the spirit and the learning lessons that this has for us and all the broad range of research we did to find out how to prepare yourself for this, the vitamins that you need for it, exercise, sleep, all that stuff, and then bring that together with something that could actually work and was verifiable. So that was my orientation. And I don't know if you want me to talk about, I would like you to talk about your experience first because it was more dramatic, and I'll follow up maybe every once in a while on mine. But
Okay.
that I wanted to get that point very, very straightforwardly. We are no longer in the old battle between scientific materialism that has shown certain technological advances that have helped people, an old notion of vaccines. We are now in a completely different era of misinformation and disinformation, and not even caring whether or not you have credibility. It's just force. And it's been exposed.
You're absolutely right, Zeus. And I relied a lot on the articles you passed through to me. We've done many shows on this already in terms of what came before this. But hey, now we actually experienced it. So yeah, I'll dive in. For both of us, I went to Gaia, which is in Boulder, Colorado. Colorado had just opened up midnight the day I arrived. So it was the first day. Everywhere you went, everyone had masks off. It's a college town. A lot of people there are vaccinated because it's kind of liberal progressive, so high vaccination rates. Not knowing much at the time about shedding and all these other things, viral shedding. And what was not stated at the time is I started digging further into it. The Delta variant had arrived in Colorado. If there was an article on it as one of the first states, somewhere 7 to 10 days prior to their taking the restrictions off. So here the Delta variant hits and everything's open. So I was out like everybody else, out dining with some of my interviewees and some of my colleagues and enjoying myself. So somewhere along the way I was exposed to it. First, didn't know it at first. And I think this is kind of the interesting part and the challenging part. And this is why, the Delta variant, they've already proved, is 50% more infectious than the Alpha variant, which was 50% more infectious than the original version of COVID-19. So we're talking about 100% more infectious.
120.
120.
Yeah, 50% and 50, it
Yeah.
actually ends up being 120, yeah.
And so the issue with it is that you don't know you have COVID. Most people like us did not know we had COVID. We live in a heavy allergen region with every kind of crop, every kind of tree and weed around our house. So we have allergies anyway. So we just had normal allergies, start getting a little bit of a stuffy head, and not to get too graphic, but I'm saying these things so that you know some of the spectrum of symptoms, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So one of them was diarrhea, loose bowels, and that went on for me at least a week and a half. Zeus's head started stopping up, and he's like a bit of a head cold. That was the first bit. Then suddenly both of us became extraordinarily fatigued. But now, mind you, we're almost 2 weeks in. We could have infected a lot of people by then. We could have spread it, but because we didn't know we had it. And that means other people with the Delta variant are going through the same thing and spreading it accidentally. And that includes people who have been vaccinated. As we know in Israel, it's now showing 50% of the people getting the Delta variant are vaccinated there. 50%. So vaccinated or not vaccinated, once you get it, you may be spreading it and have no idea, which has been the case all along. So a couple weeks in, finally, we were becoming extremely exhausted. I mean, to where I could barely wake up. In fact, I did an interview with this wonderful woman, Maren Mutter, and I could hardly get through it, and I fell asleep, and that's the day I realized something's really wrong. And finally lost my sense of taste and smell. Couldn't wake up, sleeping all the time. And we thought, okay, this is shifted. This is an allergies. We're tested. Both of us went and had the primary test done. And it came back within 24 hours that we had COVID. Now, Zeus, I'd like you to pick up with your symptom. Oh, there was another one. And this is important because we're going to talk about some other things in here. I started we were out camping right after I got home from Gaia. I started having this odd sensation of burning under my skin. Turns out they call it the rash. It's not an actual rash, not for me, but burning. It's neuralgia is what it is. Under my hands and under my arms and wrists and everything, it was burning and very uncomfortable. Zeus, you have a coaching client that had that for 3 weeks, but over his entire body. So you can explain this, but I believe that's part of the body's cytokine response, and it creates this internal inflammation that shows in a lot of ways. I ended up with the neuralgia part, but you didn't. So pick it up on what you had going, and then in addition, for me at the end, I'll tell you the rest, but brain fog, but we'll talk about what happened physically. Go ahead, Zeus.
For me, it was very much like a pretty intense. I think part of this problem was that there isn't, with all this available information, there isn't the real, because if you're just concerned about profit, you don't really care about symptoms. The symptoms have dramatically shifted. In the original variants, you had literally no mucus, especially in here. And this one is now the primary headache, and the congestion is now the primary symptom.
Right.
Before, they kept drumming into you, dry cough, it's not going to be mucus. That's how you can tell it's a cold versus the COVID. Now it's the exact opposite. It's
and
really,
we both had that. We both had the head cold. You had that part a little worse.
Yeah, I had this snottiness. It literally was identical to hay fever, and during hay fever season and everything. So for me, I didn't see anything that much different. I would say if you get cold-like or hay fever-like symptoms, I would still, now they have a $20 test you can pick up at a Walgreens or any kind of department store. I think it's Betrix now or Bentix now or something like that. There's also one called AccuView, or so I can't remember what it was.
Clearview or something View, VUE at the end of it.
But you can literally pick it up for 2 tests for $20, $25 at your local store. Just ask for the at home, and in 15 minutes you can find out whether or not you have it or not. So get one of those kits, right, and see whether or not it's allergies or something else. That's one of the most responsible things you can do. We didn't, because we just kind of went on the old news.
Well, first of all, California was opening up. Colorado had opened up. Everybody's getting ready to start celebrating the summer. We were among, like with everybody else, thinking, oh, good, this thing's starting to die down. We weren't really prepping, up for an onslaught of it at the time at all. We were ready to start moving beyond it.
Right, and no one really talked about diarrhea or loose bowels or whatever being this at all. We both got that, you and I. And we did it when we were in camping. So we thought maybe in camping there was all this extra
food poisoning.
Well, we did get a little ooginess after we ate some peach cobbler, and we thought maybe the trees created more different allergens at altitude. All of these things that you normally thought process you normally go through, and all of a sudden, bam, when you lost your sense of smell, we knew this is not typical of any kind of allergy. This is.
Right. And
this is the one thing you can bet on. If you're losing your sense of taste or smell at all, it's almost definitely COVID at this point.
Yeah, go get tested or do a home test and figure it out. And
eventually you did quite a bit, and I did a little bit. For like a day to 2 days, I had a little bit of smell issue, a little taste issue, and then it was okay.
Well, for me, it was only about, it was a week to 10 days. Some people, it's lasting months. Yeah. I was really lucky, but we'll get into what we did about it. Also, what happened when I lost the sense of smell and I was sleeping a lot is I noticed I was having a harder time breathing. So you ordered the oximeter so you can measure your blood oxygen levels, and also a digital thermometer. And it also measures heartbeat rate, your heart rate. So the oximeter, you put it on my finger, and I thought, whoa, this isn't right. You look pretty normal. My oxygen had started dropping, and then it actually dropped to what is considered a pretty dangerously low level, which was, it got as low as 87. We normally live at around 98, 97, 98 is good oxygen levels. You can be hospitalized when it drops that low. That is one of the things they look for. And the experience of it was that I could barely walk anywhere, and it was just shortness of breath. But at the same time, my heart rate had gone up to 118 resting for the days my oxygen blood levels dropped. So I called Denise Warden, and I said, look, I have COVID, and now I'm struggling with oxygen and breathing. And that's where a couple things get really interesting. Zeus, do you want to add anything at this point before we go into the next phase of this story where we started helping ourselves?
Yeah, I think my response was different than yours. My oxygen level didn't really get below 93. My heart rate did increase a little bit, but not a lot. Like my resting heart rate's around 60, lower 60, sometimes upper 50s, and it got up into the 70 range, upper 70 range. But, and which is still, it's a significant increase. But all these signs are telling you that your body is needing to get oxygen into your body. And yes, having that pulse oximeter, having the temperature, neither one of us had any fever. And that was another thing that was misleading. You get this notion that you're going to have this kind of fever kind of spike in temperature.
Well, that's the only thing they measure when you go out in public or,
Yes.
to whatever kind of a hospital or an office building, they measure your temperature. That's not really relevant.
It wasn't relevant in this case, even in the midst of your best, your highest symptoms when your oxygen was dropping down. At most, I think you had maybe a 1 degree increase in temperature, and that was it. So again, a lot of this is because we were set up to think it was one thing, and then if it didn't match that, then it's something else. This is a highly mutable disease that requires a comprehensive, integrated approach. That if you choose to have a vaccine or not is not actually even the main issue. It's what you're going to do around it to support yourself, to take care of yourself, and how you're going to inform yourself, and not just in the week or 2 or 3 in which the symptoms present themselves, but months after that in terms of recuperation, in terms of even learning and even enhancement of your body's understanding about how to deal with diseases going forward. So there's a positive end to this as well.
There definitely is, but I'll tell you what I was extremely disappointed in is the fact that this was not readily available. If you've got this thing moving around the world, unique, you could say, human with human intervention, a virus going around the world, you would think that somewhere at some point the media would have said, okay, here's your checklist. This is what to look for. We have a new variant. These are the primary symptoms we're seeing statistically. There's nowhere to go. We had to figure it out on our own. And that's with Zeus doing all this incredible research. We didn't know. And so where you can literally go to your drugstore, free vaccines today, ice cream cones for kids, beers for people who want to get vaccinated, lotteries for people to encourage them to get vaccinated, but nothing about if you do happen to contract it, you need to know what the symptoms are so you don't keep spreading it around to people. Nothing. You could go to random sites and find this or that symptom. So that's why we're doing this in part, is to tell you the array of symptoms we experienced. Go ahead, Zeus. Sorry for interrupting.
I think that's a really, really important point. I think more than anything, this thing has shown how orthodoxy and the typical or mainstream or conventional approaches don't work very well with a fast-moving, fast-mutating thing that's very comprehensive and very complex. They're always looking for the silver bullet or the golden pill, right? And this does not work with COVID. We've done many, and I encourage your audience to look at some of the previous videos we've done on this. We have done a summary, you and I, on all the vitamin supplements and lifestyle adjustments you need to do on this. We've done some on some of the silencing that has happened around various alternative treatments and so forth. And I, again, encourage people to go back into those if you haven't. But the main thing we have to do is realize this is about us. This is our relationship with this disease. Yours and mine were very different, right? Your response was different with mine. But what we had was all that information surrounding us in a way that helped both you and I immensely increase our chances, increase our health. That's the main thing to remember. And it was integrated. It wasn't one team versus another, vaccine anti versus vaccine pro. In fact, we even said, if you choose to get vaccine, there's a whole vitamin regimen that can support you in that. And even ivermectin itself can be used to support people who have vaccines to defray some of the effects, at least according to some of these studies.
Right.
It's contentious. I mean, some of it's contentious. That's fine. If things have low risk and high, even possible benefit, and homeopathy also goes under this, then why not make that part of a comprehensive integrated approach that's going to increase your chances and your knowledge of your own body going forward?
Well, that's exactly what we chose to do, and that's what we did. So fortunately, I mean, the whole I word that you just said, that particular drug, that was a journey in itself. So what happened is after we found out we were positive, and certainly by then I'm starting to experience these other symptoms, you had been doing research on this, and it appeared that this was really having an effect in impoverished nations around the world that couldn't get vaccines. They were supplementing them with ivermectin, and the rates of death were just dropping like a stone in Peru and India. So we were watching the statistics on this and thought, okay, time to pull that card. So we looked around through the group that you had been following with Dr. Pierre Corey, and the group of MDs that was listed. We found one of the MDs that was able to do a phone interview with us and then give us a prescription for the I word, Ivermectin, right? And and first of all, we started taking that immediately that day. But Denise Warden, I want to add this in alongside, because people can always say, including ourselves, gee, what did it? You know, how did you start recovering? Well, it appeared to be a combination of things. But what Denise Warden suggested to me, Dr. Warden is really big on oxygen, as is Dr. James Hutton, who I greatly respect in Sedona. He heals a lot with ultraviolet, hyperbaric chamber, oxygen chamber, and also ozone. So I thought, when Denise Warden, when she found out my oxygen was low, she said, go to hyperbaric oxygen chamber. I could barely walk in there. I was almost ready to faint. Zeus figured out, he did the paperwork for me. I just really was not functional by this point. I was so spacey and tired, and got in there. And this was when the oxygen was really low. After leaving the chamber, first of all, if you haven't done hyperbarics, it's quite interesting in what it does to the body. But I wasn't able to take a breath. I couldn't breathe in, even a tiny sharp breath. It would cause spasmodic coughing. Once I got in the chamber, and you get used to decompressing, like diving, you know, you have to adjust for the pressure that's increasing. Once you get there and you're stable, which takes a few minutes, I could breathe again. My God, it felt like I hadn't had oxygen in my entire lifetime. And so I felt my energy coming back, and I felt oxygenated. Now I want to say, and I want you, Zeus, if you would please, to explain what the hyperbaric chamber is doing more on a scientific level. But I will say, coming from that position and then getting out of the chamber, that it was just a little jolt initially. I felt like I couldn't get air again, because my body was now having to come back to a normal oxygen, not so rich environment. So it freaks you out just a little bit for a second or two, but then you just adjust back. And I went home and then took the oximeter levels again, and I'd gone up about 3 points after one session. So I bought a package of 5, and I went 4 days in a row, and we began taking our ivermectin at the same time. So these two seem to both be working in their own way, whether it was synergetic, whether it was not synergetic. What's the word, Zeus?
Synergistic.
Yeah, synergistic. My brain fog, I'm 90%, but I'm still searching for certain words. That brain fog thing is not funny. It's for real. Synergistic. So whether they work synergistically or individually, we don't know. But I started recovering as soon as I started taking ivermectin and oxygen. So you really need to figure out, if you do get something like this, figure out where hyperbaric chamber is. It's really, I think it was really key in recovering, because over about 4 days, my oxygen levels went back up into the normal range. So Zeus, go ahead and maybe a little comment or two on why the hyperbaric chamber appears to work so well for this.
Well, the ivermectin, for instance, they have taken people off of ventilators after a day of ivermectin. There have been documented cases of that. So it could have been ivermectin alone, but I can tell you that it was a much more intensified effect with a fair degree of certainty, even from scientifically, with regard to that in combination with a hyperbaric chamber. A hyperbaric chamber actually increases the pressure within the chamber. What that does is it increases the ability of the body to dissolve gases like oxygen into the blood supply. So what happens is COVID disrupts your vascular system, including your oxygen exchange. Not only does it cause clotting and inflammation, which already limit the efficiency of oxygen exchange and a healthy exchange of waste and oxygen or gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen and other things, because you can also have problems with constipation and dehydration as well. So you have that, and we'll concentrate on that. But when you have that thrown off from all these different things, what this hyperbaric chamber does is it allows, especially because it's supplying much heavier doses of oxygen, not the 21% you normally get, but higher doses. But by increasing the pressure, it allows far more, some 20-fold more, 20 times more of that oxygen kit into your blood plasma. So
it felt like being in a rainforest where my entire being was being fed, every cell with oxygen. It felt unbelievable.
And that is what the genius of that is, because this is a medium-term gain of getting through this without getting into a hospital and without dying from it. There is a time, and it's usually about 2 weeks after symptoms.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Boom, 2 to 3 weeks, and actually at the 21 day from first exposure or first detection all the way to 21 day, your viral load has gone way down. It's the after effects. This thing dysregulates your system, creates those cytokine storms, creates those clotting, creates the changes to your actual red blood cells such that your oxygen and CO2, mainly the oxygen, is not really getting into your tissues. Hyperbaric chamber corrects that by allowing even inefficient, damaged, or discoordinated blood cells and vascular system to absorb far more oxygen and get it out to your body.
Really important.
That's what created the uptick. And we had a scientific test of this. We had you do the oximeter before you did it, and then we had you do the oximeter after
every day, and then the next morning.
Right.
And it maintained 2 steps forward, 1 step back each day, but it stepped up over 4 days back to the normal range.
Right. And ventilators do not seem to operate on this principle. Like I said, it's like drinking through a fire hose. Instead of opening your body, which is what hyperbaric does, to receive and dissolve more oxygen, it's trying to force more in there.
Right.
You can't force it into a system that cannot accept it. Yeah. But you can work with a hyperbaric oxygen chamber to allow physics to help you open your body, very scientific, through pressure and increased oxygen content to get it into your body. And especially during those critical times like you had, Regina, where your oxygen is getting to the critical level, it is absolutely critical to just get that oxygen in there and to allow time, to buy time and work with the ivermectin and other therapies to allow your body to recover past those really tenuous points.
Yes.
As your body is starting to produce those antibodies, as your body is starting to get over those humps, there is these critical points, and usually it's about 2 to 3 to 4 days where you need to have something to keep you at a manageable level as you go through it.
Well, I'm very grateful to Denise, Dr. Warden, for recommending that, and she was adamant, go find one, get in there now. And so that was the most brilliant advice. I hope you're enjoying this video, because if you are, there are dozens more like it on my site, all supported by people like you. So if you'd like to keep this work rolling in and join our community, just click on the Patreon button at reginameredith.com. That also gives you access to insider commentary, my live book club, and other live events with special guests. So join in. Thanks. The other thing that was going on simultaneously is I still had this tingling, this burning under my skin. And it turned out, Zeus, you were listening to that international group of doctors, and they said one of the other things that people were using successfully as a repurposed drug, as the eye drug is, for the inflammatory effects, which we talked about a bit ago, and that painful response to that, they were using another drug repurposed called fluvoxamine. Now, you didn't have inflammation and didn't use it, but the same doctor said, if you're having these kinds of symptoms, you need to go on that along with the eye drug. I did. It's an antidepressant drug.
Right.
In the, what is that, serotonin group of chemicals, Zeus?
Yeah, there's serotonin, SSRI, serotonin. Yes. They reduce uptake of serotonin. So they keep more serotonin in your system.
Yes.
So an inhibitor of taking serotonin out of your system.
Right.
That's what the SSRI stands for.
Well, I found it interesting because I've never been depressed. And if someone even say, my sister says, it's wild watching you. You have the mildly manic part of manic depressive with none of the depressive, and that's how I get stuff done. A lot of movement in my life, and that's true. And of course, anyone who's been manic or even mildly manic knows it's a lot of fun, and you don't want to give that up. Well, I found, just as a side effect, an antidepressant actually knocked me down to where I could only think one thought at a time and focus on one thing, which probably made me a lot more bearable for people around me. But it didn't feel good. I didn't get as much done.
Right.
So that's the fluvoxamine part of it, but it did. It took all the internal inflammation down. It worked like a dream. So just letting you know that. If you do end up with this down the road, that's another piece of it that you can add to that puzzle.
And let me, the group of international doctors that are working on this that are critical care workers, it's called FLCCC, 3 C's. The frontline critical care COVID, or frontline COVID critical care workers. Okay, so if you look up FLCCC, I think it's .com, or just put in FLCCC, it will bring up their homepage. They have places where you can get the I word, and they also have a protocol spelled out.
Yes.
A prophylactic protocol to prevent you from getting COVID, a treatment protocol if you have it, and a long haul or post-COVID thing once you got it. Once you've had it. And that's what we were working on. Fluvoxamine is part of that post protocol to help with neuralgia, help a little with brain fog as well. Apparently,
yes.
Some success with
that.
I
think that was the primary function of it, was the brain fog. And I was definitely having brain fog. But there was another piece of this too that we should probably put in at this point. I had been taking some, and everyone says it differently. It's BOLUOKE. Right. Which is a silkworm enzyme. Okay, it's called lumbrokinase. Lumbrokinase, if you want to look it up in terms of what its function is. It has parallels in the pharmaceutical industry that are used for heart issues. Well, this is natural. You can order it. Comes out of Canada. And so I had been taking a little bit of it, and then at the beginning of COVID, at the beginning of the whole COVID phenomena, not for me personally, just as part of a preventative. And what it does is it stops the fibrin buildup, this clotting thing that you've been reading about, and the lingering damage to the heart and lungs and such. It essentially stops the formation of the fibrin from building up into fibroids and these other, you can explain it a little better, Zeus, tumors, not tumors, but blockages and such. So I was told, get on a higher dose of this Baluque, I call it, okay? And stay on it while you're experiencing these symptoms and then beyond it. So now cut to a little bit later, starting to feel better now, went into a local MD that we'd been told about, who was actually working with SARS-CoV-2 at Fort Meade in his military days as a researcher. So he understood the nature of this. He also had some heart issues from the stress of his job in the military in that time in Vietnam. So he has some heart issues himself. Otherwise, a really wonderful, fit guy. I went to see him to get checked out and say, hey, what do my lungs sound like? Does it look like there's any long-term damage? And he is also a supporter and had been putting his clients on low dosages of the eye drug as a preventative. He asked me what I've been doing. When I told him about the Beluque, he said, my God, you know about this. He said, I take 2 a day, and any client that has any kind of pulmonary issues, I make sure they take this. So I'm now staying on a couple a day instead of 1 a day for a little while, and probably I might just stay on it. I mean, it's a wonderful preventative. But that was another part of not incurring kind of long-term cardiopulmonary damage. None that can, he said, I sound totally clear and good to go. So I'm very grateful for that, because I was certainly at risk of that. Zeus, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say again, none of this is construed as medical or expert advice.
No.
Right from the beginning, let me reinforce the fact that your best chance is to be engaged yourself, to make choices that bring this information. You know your body best. Speak with qualified people. Do your own research. This becomes part of the information you can get. It should not be seen as the gospel truth.
No, this is just our experience. That's
Right.
what I said. Our personal journey, the
Right.
Delta Blues, our personal experience.
Right.
So I'm just sharing so that if any of this pops up with you, you'll be able to write some of this down and say, wait a minute, let me talk to whoever your health practitioner is and see how they feel about it, how I feel about it, how you feel.
And on that webpage, FLCCC, they do have places where you can get ivermectin, and you can get in contact with doctors that can prescribe ivermectin. Yeah. So that's one way to get it. We happened to go to an actual health food store. We were able to get a local reference, because health food
stores. The same doctor I'm
talking
talking about, yeah.
Yes, this doctor we're talking about. Should we mention the doctor's name, or
no,
we live in Sacramento?
No, because they could get in trouble. I mean, there are people that patrol this stuff. Don't want to get him in trouble.
So basically, going to your health food store, naturopath, and others, usually you can find through the grapevine a local person that is willing to do this. And let me make it absolutely clear. It is absolutely within the right, and I would even say the ethical obligation of a doctor who believes, one, that this repurposed drug, this I word, right, because it normally has worked as an antiparasitic, but it has very good antiviral properties, not just for COVID, but also for Zika, for AIDS, for HIV, for many others, West Nile virus, dengue
fever.
Yes. And that happens with all kinds of drugs, including Viagra, which used to be a heart medicine, and now it's one of the biggest selling drugs in the world. It has nothing to do with heart medicine. I can tell you that right now. So it is the obligation, as well as complete legal right, for any doctor to use the professional judgment to help treat their patient in a way that can use a repurposed drug and prescribe a repurposed drug. Period. So if anyone tells you that it's either pseudoscience or that it's illegal to use a repurposed drug without, quote, FDA approval, I tell them, guess what? Your Pfizer vaccine is not approved by the FDA. We found that on a fact sheet about it's emergency authorized, but the only reason why it's authorized is because there is apparently, to their mind, no effective or safe alternative, more effective or safe alternative.
But now, the I word, that one has been FDA approved for decades.
It has been FDA approved for decades, very low to any risk to taking it. It's been transient and or mild for over 4 billion doses around the world. And so now they're in a bind. Now we want to make more money by creating more therapeutics, but we already have one that's off patent, can be produced very cheaply, and generically to actually help millions, if not billions, of people around the world. And that's where we are right now. So if you yourself, I'm going to encourage you to do more research on this and need access to that. There is a site on the FLCCC site which said, how do I get it and how can I be linked up with the doctor? And the other one is linking up with local alternative local health food stores, naturopaths, and so forth, to find doctors that can prescribe that or will prescribe it, because they all can prescribe it. Every single one of those doctors can write you out a prescription right now. Many of them have resisted it. For what reason, I do not know. It's extremely safe, and it has been shown in several meta-analyses to have a massive impact. And these FLCC guys, they're all critical care workers. So they're the ones on the front line having to deal with it. I would much more trust them than some bureaucrat or someone else.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to know, this, what we're doing right now in talking with you and sharing this is really part of our, all of us individually and collectively empowering ourselves and gaining knowledge ourselves, because we're in new terrain now and it crosses over. We're in a new world. We all know this, that where information is flowing very differently. People are being propagandized very differently. So we feel it's our job to really help you understand so we can share our stories with each other. And we even on ivermectin, we have a community called Our Neighborhood.Earth, ONE, and in it we have a lot of really amazing people, a lot of healers and artists and so forth. And when we had one private meeting on this, one of them said, look, I have a connection coming from Mexico. If anyone in the community needs any, let me know. I'll try to hook you up with some. Whether as a prophylactic or, if they've had symptoms. So, I mean, that was a very generous, lovely thing to do, but that's how the new world is working now. Now it's back to community, it's back to us. So we found that way. Then our doctor, the same one that I told you about, right near us, he prescribes it, except you don't have to pay between $300 and $4,000 for a phone visit. Some of the people that were recommended on that list were opportunists because people were sick. So find who you can. But our doctor was both a chiropractor and an MD. So he's uniquely positioned. Look around your community, see who you can find that can be a partner with you. Meanwhile, we got the rest of it out of India. So Zeus, you go ahead and talk about that. You found one of the supplies for
the most ideal way to do it is there's an app called GoodRx. That reduced our drug costs for the flu. Would have really reduced the drug cost for ivermectin, but we took another one, an anti-nausea drug, and it went from like something in the upper 200s to right around $60, literally 75% off. And it's just an app that you can use in any pharmacy if you're not insured, and it seriously reduces the amount of money you have to pay for your drugs. So we use that the second.
GoodRx. We've also seen ads for it. GoodRx is the name.
So if you use GoodRx, don't use CVS. CVS is literally denying people this. They are skunks. But Walmart, Walgreens, others are much better about this. Even Costco is much better about this in terms of filling a prescription once you do get it. Ideally, what you do is have the GoodRx. You have the local doctor prescribing it. You go in, and you're going to only pay about $25 to $30 for 60 3-milligram pills. That's enough to get you through maybe a couple months, or if you're in the middle of COVID, to get you through a week, right? And that's not bad.
What the research shows. Yeah. I took 12 milligrams. You took 12 milligrams a day. This is this is not advice. This is not medical advice. This is our personal experience. We were given this information from a variety of healthcare practitioners and MDs and settled on the 12 milligram amount.
We went with the actual qualified doctor's recommendation on this.
Right.
We didn't just go off on our own research here. We followed this thing. And if you take it, and it's important to know to take this on a full stomach with a lot of fatty foods. If you take it on an empty stomach, it does a good job wiping out the parasites, but it doesn't get into your blood as well. It's a fat soluble thing, and you can increase by over double. Like if you took 12, you're going to get basically the effect of 24 milligrams. If you take it with like something like, I think it's 30 grams of fat. I took it with some MCT oil, two tablespoons, that's your 30. I take it with yogurt. Those are other forms of it. They have fat in them. So that gets more of it into your bloodstream, right? And less of it going down through your digestive tract. If you have parasitic issues, they say empty stomach may be better. If you have COVID or COVID symptoms, having especially a fatty thing in your stomach, as you're taking it on a full stomach has been proven to be better.
Yeah.
And uptake.
Very good point.
That's a very important point right there. You've got the GoodRx. The thing in India that we have, they they are used to, and they're making money on it because it's about $5 a pill, and they're making it for
Oh, the
pennies.
price of the eye drug has definitely gone up. Even our
Yeah,
friend that had someone mule it back from Mexico for us said the
yeah.
price had
And you can
already
do it, and it still
going
works, and they send it in nondescript packages with no labeling through the U.S. Postal Service. But it is, I found it to be, and they throw in some extra, Viagra salads. It's like, it seems like not on the up and up.
They were literally throwing Viagra samples in with it from India.
So it gets to be almost like, is this for real? But from what I can tell, it is for real. But still, the preferred route is a local doctor prescribing it, good RX, and going to a pharmacy that will actually fill it right by you. It's going to be the lowest cost, both for the drug and for the initial consultation for the most part, and it will allow you to continue to get it as you go into the future, right?
Yes,
If
and
you need it again, you go to back to the same doctor, you get the same prescription, you pay the same price. So
you
I
got
would say that is the primary path to do this.
I agree.
And by the way, you also get a qualified doctor's recommendation exactly how to use it, so no one can criticize you for going off the reservation. You've done everything right? You've gone through the whole thing right. You've gone to the qualified protector. You've done the right thing, and you've not paid an arm and a leg. That's the way to do it. And of course, they're going to try to keep that from you. And we're not. We're going to go right to it. But there are other alternatives if for some reason you can't do that. You can go on the FLCCC site, find a doctor that will do it over the phone or over Skype or something, and you can go through India or other manufacturers and do get a hold of it.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because this doctor that we're talking about, this local man who is both a chiropractor and an MD, I started sending other people to him too that had already had COVID and were having some heart issues. Mm-hmm. And so they could start looking at the whole protocol because they're a pretty creative lot. I think doctors of chiropractic, DOs, and also naturopathic physicians, they usually have extra tools in their bag. So those are good places to start looking right off the bat. And he's turned into everyone's favorite doctor now. Now we pay for Kaiser. So, we're paying for a service. They did not believe in any alternative care. When they found out we had it, they basically sent us a notice, drink a lot of water, if you can't breathe, go to the hospital. And that was it. That said, I just want to say this. I had a conversation with, you remember this, Zeus, the part of the COVID MD outreach team. Once you are in the system, they'll make a phone call to you and then just kind of talk to you about it. How are you doing? Do you need anything? Which he was a wonderful man. And we started talking and he said, you know what? Nobody knows what's going on with this. He said, I've been working since COVID began in the ER. He was an ER doc. And he said, I've never gotten it in all this time, been exposed over and over to COVID. He said, my family, who I tried to protect, I had my wife and my 4 children get vaccinated, as is recommended by all the HMOs and such. And he said, every single one of them got COVID a couple months later. His entire family got sick. He said, no one knows. No one really knows what's going on here. That's just a fact. And so we had a really lovely discussion. I said, well, I'm going this direction. I'm going to use these protocols and do what I think is right. And he was actually supportive. And at one point I said something that could get him in trouble if it was recorded. He said, I didn't hear that. So, these guys are walking a thin line themselves. Right. So I just wanted to put that out because this came from a Kaiser MD. Right. Everyone but him and the family got sick with COVID after double vaccinations, by the way.
I think we can be compassionate toward each other. We don't have to have the white hats and the black hats and the good teams and the bad teams here. If people don't want to, or ignorantly going to not look at alternatives, especially ones that appear to be proven effective and safe, then that's on them. We will do the informing of each other. There was one other thing we didn't talk about, actually, Regina. That was Cobra Toxin.
Yes, please.
There is a patch. There's a bit of a hole in the long-term recovery to COVID. They talked fluvoxamine. They also talked about certain corticosteroids, as helping. But sometimes you get these syndromes, macrophage syndrome or mast cell syndrome, that seems to last for quite a long time, and they don't really have something to help with the long-term inflammation of that necessarily. We tried something. It's Cobra Toxin, patch for all with the number 4, patch.
I think the shortcut is patch20.com.
Right,
That
patch20.com.
company, just because I think you can get it cheaper if you use that URL.
Yeah,
but
you get 20% off, so patch20.com.
Okay,
right?
but it's called, I think the patch is called Ultimate Pain Relief. It's not called
Ultimate Pain Relief,
Flip it
and it
over,
has a
it's in
little
there.
snake on it. and they come in 6 and they come in 30. I think the 30 is cheaper per unit. But we both tried that and had an immediate effect, especially with me, on a little bit of pain and swelling around the joints, as in, the effects of this inflammation and so forth. It had an immediate effect. We didn't use it for that long, but it did carry us through a week and a half or 2 weeks. And I think it was also an effective part of our personal strategy.
Something to play with if you have chronic pain. You could play with it and then see if that's something that could work in a situation like that for you. So that's just another tool that was in our box. And thank you. I forgot to bring it up.
Right.
Appreciate that. So in the end, I mean, I've said this before. I'm very grateful to have gone through this, and and everyone's wired differently. Even though my oxygen was low and I couldn't breathe very well, I never felt like this was going to get me. I felt like, okay, we got to go to the next step and improve by the day, and was just patient with it. But the amount that we've learned, including about the really pretty ugly politics around it, was interesting. What we've learned by way of resources to help one another was amazing. I mean, just priceless. And we got through it. And even I, with that kind of triple risk factor person that I am, have gotten through it. And I'd say probably even every symptom is gone. Everything's clear. Little tiny bit of brain fog in terms of just reaching for certain words. It's still a little bit of a blank spot here and there. But that's, I'd say, corrected up to 90% already. So both of us are back. We came back faster than they expected. The MD said take a couple of months. It's been a couple of weeks since we got over it. We're feeling fine. We're literally a couple of weeks. And we're pretty much good to go. You can go out and do long distance riding. I'm building my stamina back up. But what's being done to stop us from looking in these directions is, in my opinion, immoral and unethical, if not even criminal in some cases, to withhold information from a public that needs it. Critical information during a time of, quote, global crisis. And so, yeah, and go ahead and talk about that, Zeus, even Canada.
I wanted to throw in an example here that shows you how criminal it is.
Yeah.
I was listening to a lawyer that represents people that have sued for that I word drug, right? There was one hospital in which the infectious disease doctor that worked for that hospital prescribed the I word drug, okay? And the hospital itself still refused to administer it to that patient. Can you believe the kind of arrogance needed for that kind of thing? You override your own doctor. And they were able to successfully sue to get it. In each one of these cases, they were off ventilators. There were 4 different cases that this one, they kind of specialize now in representing people who are trying to get a hold of this. And in each case, they all went out of the hospital in very short amount of time, got off ventilation, etc., and they were gone. So we have not just real world success cases, but we have worldwide whole population success cases in India and others, where as soon as they intervened with ivermectin and made that policy, they went down. And we had certain cases in provinces where they were basically bought out, or they
they used remdesivir instead, had the exact opposite effect.
They just went right back up again. So the critical care doctors are the ones I trust. The actual result in the actual real world is what I trust. When these people sued, they got on ivermectin and they were out of the hospital and off ventilators in a matter of days. One has to ask the question, why would these hospitals, given that clear evidence in front of their face and given the clear safety of this drug, decide who are they working for. They are not working for that patient. We do know that. And that, to me, is the most dangerous things that I've seen so far. It is saying in explicit terms, you are fodder for our power and decisions. We are not here, according to the Hippocratic Oath, to do no harm to you and to make sure you have your best chance. You are here for us. And I find that just contemptible beyond belief.
Contemptible and offensive on every moral and ethical level. And there are doctors who have come out and stated, look, if this thing works, if it can either prevent it at an early level, or if you get it right off the bat, as soon as you get symptoms, knock everything else out, or even like us, we were already in the long haul part of it by the time we started taking it, and then knock it out after you have deeper symptoms. They said, if you have this at your disposal, it's easy to produce. Why are we giving people vaccines at all? You know, now that said, there's some evidence that if you have your immune system you're older, your immune system is trashed, and like my father and the people in his assisted living home, they are all vaccinated and they all did okay with it. They don't have as strong and robust immune system as we do, and certainly as children and younger and teens and young adults have. So there's the argument for people who are on the more vulnerable side perhaps getting vaccines, and you can all do your own research on that. We've all done a ton of it. But the bottom line, it comes down to, if you are exposed via vaccine or if you get it, we're talking about the immunity afterward. And that is something that they're doing a lot of research on, studies on, a lot of articles are coming out on it right now. And again, just like the I word drug, they are putting naturally developed immunity, meaning like we had when we had chickenpox as a kid. That was lifelong immunity in that case. And for many, many things that we've caught along the way, we have natural immunity. But now they're saying, oh, doesn't look like this one's going to give you natural immunity if you get it. That's not true. No. And they're actually like, known as, you have 2 vaccines, you can't leave our country or come into this country. Why don't you accept a positive test COVID followed by an IgG immune test that's positive? That should be every bit as good. And as we found out doing the research on it, natural immunity is more than good enough. It appears to be superior. Okay?
Absolutely.
At this point. So if you want to make a final comment on that, Zeus.
Yeah, and we're not in the game. Let me clarify this. We're not in the game of saying the I word, whatever, versus a vaccine. Because the fact is, there have been research that shown that this I word drug works well in helping you when even if you've chosen to get a vaccine.
Yeah, because that is a type of exposure.
And we have said on here that high-risk groups that have underlying conditions are quite a bit older. The research, especially since they were the lion's share of people being hospitalized and dying, that the research indicates that the vaccines would be well placed in those. And people under 18, less than 2 in a million are dying, and less than 1% are being hospitalized. So the research is showing that they're not well positioned for that. And the people in between, it is time to make your own assessment, right?
Talk a little bit about the immunity issue before we sign off here in terms of what people can expect, whether they get a vaccine. Well, they don't know yet. In fact, I think Pfizer's own site says they don't know how long it'll last. That's the
nice thing about natural immunity is that it tends to be a lot longer lasting. In this case, they've proven that it will last 7 to 8 months at least. And that's basically the entire time that they're really doing this study. So there's a very good chance that this has many years or even a lifetime.
Well, can I add, they're finding at that 7/8, because that's the only amount of time they've had to really study it here on this. They're finding that the effects are not waning. It's at that point, it's still active. They just don't know how long. Some are surmising it could go for years or even a lifetime. Let's talk about
they're finding it's moving from the spleen into the marrow. So there are scientific indicators that this will be a long-lasting thing that's remembered by the body and can produce things again. The one nice thing about natural immunity, it takes the whole virus into account. And the problem is that many of these vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer in particular, had an early form of the spike protein. That is the part that's now mutating. Okay? And those things are becoming less effective against that mutating virus.
Well, that's according to Pfizer themselves.
Or
It's
spike
become
protein.
less effective against the Delta variant, dropping from 97% down to in the 60s now in the
Right.
US, in the 50s in Israel, who's done a study on it.
Right. I mean, there are different things that say, oh, it's only dropping a little bit, and other things that are saying it's dropping more. The fact is, it is dropping and will drop. The innate immune system that gets through natural exposure is a much more comprehensive system, period. It's a much more vital system. And in every way, shape, or form, it largely, like with chicken pox, would be recommended. People trying to get their kids chicken pox, but if they don't get it, then they want to get a chicken pox because the adult form of that disease is really hard.
Right.
A similar logic operates here. And that is older people who don't have any innate immune system pretty much left and who have serious risk factors seem to benefit pretty well from this because it may defray that boosting up in hospital. And so vaccines can have effectiveness. And even those that have temporary effectiveness, like these are beginning to show themselves to be, can get you past those initial waves of epidemic and get you past hospitals being,
overwhelmed,
grim and so forth, and that can save your life. So I'm not going to diss vaccines, but especially for those high risk and older people, it seems to have effectiveness. They've demonstrated effectiveness in terms of limiting. They say it again. These are companies themselves who are selling this, who are telling us this. We don't have independent confirmation of this for the most part. In terms of lowering the COVID, which is the effects of the SARS-CoV-2, but given a choice, I think it could be fairly stated that natural immunity will be superior.
It sounds like it at this point from the various articles I've read from the NIH even. So, in summary here, everyone has made their own choice. And we know most of the people we know have been vaccinated for a variety of reasons. A, wanting to travel out of the country. B, their kids wouldn't let them see their grandkids unless they were vaccinated. And everyone has reasons for choosing what we have each chosen. Zeus and I chose our path, and you've chosen your path. Doesn't matter what the path you've chosen is at this point. What matters is how we start educating ourselves, because we're going to be having to contend with other things in the future. How we move forward and educate ourselves and make these informed decisions for how we're going to support our own immune systems into the future. And I hope that sharing some of this information with you in terms of how what the symptoms were and how we decided to approach it, and what the long-term effects aren't, we're very lucky for, and how we're recovering. I'm hoping that this is shedding some light on it as this news is moving like fire around the globe about this Delta variant. We're some of the early people in America to get the Delta variant. So I really, this is all to be empowering and to all kind of join hands on this one, learn from each other, teach each other, get the resources we can get together, because the people in any positions of authority are not going to be telling us the full truth anytime soon. That's a rare body that's going to tell us the truth, because if you want to look at it from the most cynical point of view, you could say this is a business plan. That's why they don't inform you as to what the symptoms are, so you don't transmit it. That's why they scare the hell out of you on the news every single night. That's why they give our kids ice cream cones to line up for the jabs. It's a business plan. Anything else, okay, I don't want to really argue with anyone, but that's the bottom line. It's the evidence points that to be absolutely true. And a final comment from you on that, Zeus. I'm pretty adamant about it.
I would say, listen, motives, look at not what people say, look at what they do. Motives determine everything, and they can be shown over time. So look at what people do. Are they doing things to care and to protect and to use all available methods to, in a comprehensive way, give you your best chance of health and survival? Or are they trying, especially for bad reasons, to cut off the debate, to cut off that information, to put down and to humiliate and to degrade. If that is what they're doing, then it's showing you what their motive is. And that motive is not to help. It is to advance themselves, whether it's their ego, their reputation, their profit margin, and it always will be at the expense of someone else. So there is only a win-win and lose-lose. The lose-lose is where arrogant people begin to win and profit by exploiting others. The win-win is where we rebel against that and we use the best science and the best alternative stuff and bring it together to help one another, as we're doing in this video. That really is where the so-called battle lines are drawn, between compassionate people that really want to help and move things forward, and will use good sense, intuition, and spirit, all of it, not one against the other, versus other people who will dismiss and try to bully their way to controlling other people's lives. We do not need that. We do not want that, and we cannot allow that. We have to be very firm with that. We cannot allow that to be a practice that continues.
I couldn't agree more. You and I are totally on the same page. We decided to approach it this way, and here we are out the other side sharing with you. So I really hope this has been beneficial to you. I hope it stays up on YouTube. We don't know what's going to happen because of the content. Hopefully we just had one of the words in it, so hopefully it won't be flagged. And please feel free to share this with anyone you feel could benefit when they're at this stage of trying to make up their mind, or they're being bullied one way or another to get a vaccine or not get a vaccine. Just share this practical kind of personal experience with them. And again, this is not intended as any medical advice for anyone.
And go to reginameredith.com if you aren't already there.
Yes, Zeus, thank you for mentioning that. At reginameredith.com, we have all our...
You always forget.
I know, and everything to mention my own site.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have that. That's supported by Patreon. Anybody who wants to jump in to the super private conversations, which we've been having with our patrons, because we feel a little more comfortable sharing the edgier stuff there than on this format that goes out to the world.
And also our neighborhood.earth.
Yeah.
Our neighborhood.earth is this community that we're talking about. There is a small fee to join, but once you're in, it's very well designed. And we have very high frequency people there.
Very high frequency that are sharing a lot of information and live events where we share regularly together. So that's turned out to be really wonderful. So that said, everybody, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this one, the Delta variant blues. Until next time, go well.